Hi friends! Today's video will be very interesting and exciting because today I'm talking about past life connections and how you can see these between charts. And it is possible to see, and it uses a couple of Varga or divisional charts, the D12 and the D60, and they're also called the Dwadasamsa for the D12 and the Shastiamsa for the D60. I'm putting down in the description how to calculate those charts. It's not difficult at all, okay? So if you're a Western astrologer or you know Western astrology, you can also calculate that chart as well, or your Western chart, okay? So whenever you have two people meet and there's a very strong affinity for each other and a very strong magnetic attraction, a lot of times those people will wonder if they have some past life connection, and if they're into that sort of thing, they will ask me about it if they come to me and want a relationship reading or something like that. So usually when there is one person's Ketu on another person's identity factor, and by an identity factor I mean the Atmakaraka, the ruler of the ascendant, which is called the Ascendant Lord or the Lagna Lord, they're the same thing. If Ketu's on the ascendant, or if Ketu is conjoined the person's moon. So you have four things in the Rashi or the birth chart. You've got Ketu conjoined the ascendant, Ketu conjoined the Ascendant Lord, Ketu conjoined the Atmakaraka, and Ketu conjoined the moon. Four of those things really usually bring people together. That's the identity factor of one person and the Ketu of another person. Now, you look at this in the birth chart, but you also examine this in the D60 chart, the Shastiamsa chart, which is the most time-sensitive chart. And like I said, I'm going to put it in the description down so you can calculate it yourself. Or if you have software, usually that will calculate it. The D60, because the nodes move through a sign very slowly. They take about a year and a half to move through a sign, and there's going to be quite a lot of time in some instances where the node is moving through the sign, and let's say the Ascendant Lord of a certain person is Saturn or Jupiter. Those planets also move very slowly. So there's going to be certain time periods of about a year and a half or so or a year where a lot of people are going to have their South Node conjoined to one age group that has their Ascendant Lord in a certain sign. And so you really have to look at that Shastiamsa, or that D60, to look at connections between charts. And you do the same thing. You look at the Ketu conjoined the Atmakaraka in the D60. You ascertain the Atmakaraka in the birth chart. The Atmakaraka stays the same throughout all of the charts, but it's always ascertained in the birth chart. It's simply the planet in highest degrees of a sign. So you find if your Atmakaraka is Saturn in the birth chart, if that's the planet in the highest degrees of a sign, that's the planet that will be the Atmakaraka throughout all the Varga charts or the divisional charts. So you find that Atmakaraka and see if it's conjoined the other person's Ketu. You find if the other person's Ketu is joined the ascendant in the D60, and for this you need very accurate birth time, or you need somebody to rectify your chart down within a minute or so. Okay, so you look for Ketu to the Atmakaraka, Ketu to the ascendant, Ketu to the Ascendant Lord of the D60 ascendant, and Ketu to the Ascendant Lord of the Rashi or the birth chart, and Ketu to the moon. So that's 5 things you look for when ascertaining if Ketu is going to hit somebody's identity factor in the D60. Usually it does. It more often than not, there's a higher percentage of a chance that it does. And if the people have already begun a relationship, or they're attracted to each other, and especially if they already have a Ketu conjoined identity factor in the Rashi. If they don't have Ketu conjoined an identity factor in the birth chart, it doesn't matter. You look at the D60. That's the main chart you want to look for. Okay, and so what you'll do, how you do this is you have person A and person B. You look at all the Ketu connections between person A and person B in their birth chart. Then you look at person A's Ketu and person B's D60 chart. Then you look at person A's Ketu and their D60 to person B's Ketu or person B's identity factor in the birth chart. And then person A's Ketu in the D60 to person B's identity factor in the D60. So you overlap the charts. And what you're mainly doing is you're overlapping the birth chart and the D60. So if you have Ketu in Libra in the birth chart, you're going to see if person B has an identity factor in Libra in the D60. So you go between charts. Do you see how that works? You do that for person A and for person B, involving their Ketus. And you count up how many times the Ketu hits an identity factor. What you use, the person who has their Ketu hit somebody else's identity factors the most, that's the person where you're going to look for their Ketu in the D12. Because the person who has their Ketu hit the other person's identity factors more is the person who's actually has a lot more karmic work with the other person. And they actually are the one that are learning more from this karmic interaction. It doesn't mean that the other person doesn't learn or grow or burn some karma or have some long-standing issues come to fruition. It doesn't mean that at all, but it does mean that the Ketu person that has their Ketu hit the identity factors of person B, they're the ones that is going to learn the most from this interaction and balance the imbalance that was there from the past life. Okay, so you take that person, you perform those tasks that I just mentioned with person A and person B in the Rashi chart, in the Rashi and D60 across charts, and then in the D60s. You compare the Ketus to the identity factors. The person who has the most identity factors hit their Ketu, that's the person you want to look for. You take their Ketu in the D12. The D12 or the Dwadasamsa is the chart of past lives. So you take that Ketu person, you place their Ketu position in the D60. Now this is in the D60. Whatever their Ketu position is in the D60, you overlap it into the D12. You see what house it is activating. Okay? Equal sign, equal house. You find the ascendant in the D12, and you look at it just like you would a regular Rashi chart or birth chart. So then you see what house that Ketu person is activating in the other person's D12. If it is activating the second house, that person was a friend, a very close friend in the past life. If that Ketu occupies the third house of the other person, that person was a sibling. If it occupies the fourth house, that person was the mother. If it occupies the fifth house, that person was a child to the D12 person. If Ketu occupies the sixth house, that person was an enemy or a competitor of some kind to the D12 person. if that Ketu occupies the 7th house, they were married in a past life or lovers. I'll get to the 8th house in a minute. I'll skip that for a second. If it was the 9th house, the person, the D12 person, was a teacher or some kind of spiritual advisor or a priest or a head of an ashram or something like that to the Ketu person. If Ketu occupies the 10th house, the D12 person was either the father or a very strong authority figure or boss, somebody very close that had a lot of authority over the Ketu person, but it's usually the father. If Ketu occupies the 11th house, the D12 person was some kind of peer or a social, someone that was in their social circle and had a lot of peer influence over that Ketu person. Ketu in the 12th and the 1st are different, and I'm going to talk about the 8th, 12th, and 1st. Now, if Ketu is in the 8th house, the Ketu person would have experienced the D12 person as someone they went through an incredibly intense crisis with, a life-changing crisis, like a plane crashes and they're the only two survivors and they have to get out of the Andes mountains or something and make their way to civilization. Or they were thrown together. There was some kind of massacre and they both survived and they had to rely on each other to get out of a city where this huge massacre was happening. Something, very intense, life or death situation where they really had to work together for survival. That's what happens when a person has their Ketu and somebody else's D12, and there's already a past life connection. If Ketu is in the 12th house of the D12 person, they experienced that person as somebody they were either in prison with, like a prison roommate, or somebody that they were in an ashram with and they were seeking God with and meditating with, someone they were getting, or someone they, got stranded on a deserted island with, someone that they experienced leaving the world with, getting away from the world in some fashion. Okay? Now, if Ketu occupies the 1st house in another person's D12, then that signifies it could be really any relationship. But that signifies a very close bond of some type. And the way you see that, if that Ketu occupies that person's ascendant in the D12, you get the other person, their Ketu. That's when you take the other person's Ketu, the D12 person's Ketu, and put it in the other person's D12, the person A's D12. And that's how you see what kind of relationship they had. And you can do that too when the Ketu person has their Ketu in the 8th house or the 12th house. You can also take the D12 person's Ketu and put it in person A's D12. I hope I'm not confusing you. I'm trying to explain this as well as I can without, going to a board or anything. People find that a little more confusing, I've noticed. But you take the D12 person, put their Ketu in the other person A's D12 to see if there is any other, you can see the relationship and what kind of, and they had to go through a crisis together, whether they were friends, parents, children, associates, siblings, what have you. Okay. When also if Ketu conjoins a planet, it's not the planet who tells you who the person is. and I'm talking about the D12 here, the Dwadasamsa. When you have somebody else's Ketu and somebody else's Dwadasamsa, and it's conjoined a planet, then that was the nature of their relationship. Even though it wasn't, let's say they were mother and child, but it's conjoined to Mercury. Well, that means that the mother was they were very good friends, and they learned skills from each other. And just a very friendly planet. Let's say it's conjoined Saturn. That means they went through a lot of sorrow. There was a lot of pain and sorrow there. And now for this lifetime, you want to see, oh, what kind of karma do we have to go through? How do we balance this out between us? Well, that's where you see that more has to do with Rahu and kind of where you're going. And also you do that across charts with the D9. And I'm going to do a video about that too. But if y'all liked this video, please tell me, because I don't want to get too technical, but you have to get technical. Astrology is really math. That's what it is. It's numbers. It's math. And it's taking sections of time and sections of space and using those in ways to see things, to see how life unfolds. And so you have to get technical to really get into the meat and potatoes of astrology. So I'm trying to explain it as best I can. But if you have any questions, please write them down in the description, because I'd love to answer if people get confused. But it shouldn't be that confusing. You have 3 charts you use for this. The birth chart, the D12, and the D60. And in the birth chart and the D60, you see how many connections there are between planet or identity factors and Ketus. And like I said, use the person who has the most Ketu connections to the other person's identity factors when you go finally use the D12. And yeah, so I think that's it for today. I'll talk about how kind of you can see if you have further karma with this person in the next video, because that really is, if you just have Ketu connections, and I'm only talking about Ketu exclusively to other person's identity factors. If there are only Ketu connections and no Rahu connections, and this is not only in the birth chart, you've got to look at other charts as well. So don't worry if you see, oh, I just have a Ketu connection with my husband. Does that mean we're going to get divorced? No, it doesn't. You have to look at you have to look at the D60 as well and the D9, but and you have to overlay with charts as well. And that works in the same way. So, but if you do see only Ketu connections between people across these other charts, then usually that it is a finishing up time in between the two people in their lives, and to perfect and move on in their lives. So yeah, so that's it for today, and I hope you like this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and remember to hit the bell button so you get notified when I make new videos. All right, so see you guys later, and bye for now.